All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. This is the potentially the first episode of the podcast yet to be named. We'll see what it ends up as.
Yes.
um, Here today on this podcast, I have myself, Micah. What's up, guys? All the people on the podcast today are Gators. I'm Micah. I've got Lewis. Did I mirror it properly? I did. Lewis over to my left.
I'm over on the other side.
That's okay. I mirrored it, so I'm pointing at you. It'll record this way.
On his end, on my end, you're pointing the wrong way.
Yep.
I'm this
I got
way on
Josiah
my
Gator,
end.
Josiah Gator up here, over here, and then I've got John Gator over there. They think it's all wrong, but on the recording, it's gonna be right. So yes, that's what I want.
Here, let me adjust it so I'm more right. Oh wait.
As long as whatever you're recording,
Reference
though,
doesn't matter for me.
it's okay to be on the wrong
It's true.
side, guys. It's okay.
Suppose.
Anyways, we're just going to be chatting about randomness today. We have a couple different things we'll talk about. We're going to do some introductions since this is the first one. Let you guys know a little bit about us. You'll probably see us four the most as we go through this, but hopefully we'll have more people as we go. We'll talk about different topics, some more serious, some more fun. But basically just an average family talking about life things and having a good time with it. So that was my first I believe. We'll see how many I have today. I'm going to try to keep it down a little.
First what?
My first
Oh,
You're going to notice I use ums a lot. Whenever I don't know
Yes.
exactly what to say, I say and it's awful. All right, so
my like.
I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Micah. This is going to be a fun time for me. I'm excited to just get to talk to different people and get different perspectives on things. Obviously, the world's a little bit crazy right now, so I wanted a way to talk to people instead of just reading about all of it and driving myself mad. That's why we're talking. Have some fun with real people. But anyways, I am 30-something years old, 31 I believe. And I stopped counting after 25 because who cares? Doesn't matter if I get to
kinda stopped
55
counting
or
after
something like that
21,
anyways.
so it works.
So, anyways, 31 years old. I have two children. Just had our second one. And I work in the gymnastics industry as a coach and facility manager. I've been doing that for about 16 years, I think. 16 years, I think is about where I'm at. So, keeps me busy, keeps me working hard. Love working with kids, love helping them grow, and grew up in a big giant family who you see a little over a third of today and all with all of us. But that's about all I'm going to talk about for now with me. So, that's it.
I'll go next. So I'm John. I am the oldest brother. That's what's up. So I'm actually the reason Micah started in gymnastics. That's my fault that he became a coach. I left and I was invaluable, and I said, well, my little brother can take over. And then he took over, and then I came back to visit, and they're like, yeah, you can stay away. We just keep him. So obviously
Right.
I was nowhere near as invaluable as he was. So I am 33, going on 34. So I have 6 children. So I got a couple more than Micah. Between Micah and myself, we have all the grandchildren.
Just a few.
So let's see. I used to be a coach. Did gymnastics and acrobatics. Actually took me from Colorado out to California, and then just recently moved back to Colorado. Shortly, or I guess technically, during the time that our father passed away a couple of years back, moved back to Colorado and being back close to family, which is nice. But currently, my wife and I own an accounting company. I work in inside sales. That's my professional background is marketing and sales, so that's been a lot of time spent in the corporate world doing that. And then I do also serve as a local elected official up here in the town of Wellington, where I live. So that's a little bit of brief background on myself.
Bam. 2 down, 2 to go. Who's next?
Reportedly.
Go for it. All right. Well, I'm Lewis, or Lee, as you'll hear me named. Depends on who you ask. I go by both. Sometimes it's something else too. You know. My online profile's Lord Zoss. You don't know. I could be called anything. Anyway, my name's Lewis. I'm the second to youngest of all of the siblings, so I'm the bottom of the totem pole. You know, down here. It's kind of a low
Nice.
ball.
Getting the
You know?
best hair.
Hey, I mean, it's colorful and long. It works for me.
That's all I gotta say about that.
People are gonna think Mike
Fair
is the
enough.
older brother.
That's right. I'm looking like
Right.
it.
But anyway, so I've done kind of as far as like what I'm up to now. I actually do solar installation, and then outside of solar installation, I do I stream online, so I do a lot of video streaming / game streaming, and I'm working on setting up a YouTube channel as well. So I've got my hands full there. Then I decide to tackle all sorts of projects in my free time. So I just don't really have much free time because I use it all for everything else. Before I did solar, I kind of did a little bit of everything. Some IT work, I did some maintenance work, and I've done like various odd jobs and those maintenance jobs and so on and so forth. A little bit of mechanic stuff, house maintenance, like it goes all over the place. So mostly hands-on jobs besides IT. That was behind the desk phone job and didn't really like that one. So back to the hands-on jobs I go. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I am 20, oh boy, I forget, 20, 23, 20, 23. I think I'm 23, maybe 24. I don't know.
It doesn't matter between 21 and 25, and then after 25,
I think I'm 23. We'll go with 23 for the moment. I think that's right. Who knows? Could be wrong.
Stay tuned for further information.
Yeah, stay tuned for further information. I'll do the math later. But yeah, haven't really gone very far. Just kind of lived here forever.
I like it.
Well, it's a good place to live.
It is a great place to live. That's not that is no doubts there.
And we all live in the Front Range area in Fort Collins, which is great. So my name is Josiah, and I'm the middle child, actually, in the family of 9 siblings. I arrived right in the middle there, and 28 years old. And my background is actually in music, so I studied percussion and music through my undergrad and graduate degrees, and then taught 6th through 12th grade. And before that, I actually taught everything from kindergarten to senior citizens, actually. So a lot of my background revolves around teaching, whether I was in school or after I graduated. I was teaching full-time and really enjoyed that. But I've always had an interest in politics and decided to make a bit of a career change and start working for political consulting firms, and that's taken me through municipal, state house, congressional, and Senate races. And I'm currently doing that. I've been able to travel a lot through those races, and so was able to come back home and work in here after living in Texas, and that brings us up to today.
But you went back to Texas?
Well,
Back from Texas.
back from Texas.
I was gonna say, if he made it back from Texas, that was really fast from when I saw him earlier today.
Wait.
Are you in Colorado or Texas right now? I'm confused.
I'm in Colorado.
Yeah,
So I
okay,
was born and raised in Colorado, moved to Texas, and now I'm
Okay.
back.
No, I think I was with you until he said that, and I was confused. Oh, by the way, if you guys, if you're
By
watching
the
this
way.
and you hear us call him, not block my face. Yep, there you go. Him, Lou. If you hear me call him Lee, that is Lewis Gator the Fourth. So
Yes.
sometimes we call him Lewis, sometimes we call him Lee. That was his name for a while. As a kid was Lee. We called him Lee. So same person.
You're stuck, apparently. No.
A little
Stuck with the
bit.
siblings.
Probably because I asked for it to stick, but who knows?
You know, that is what it is. So you're gonna hear a mix of that, Lee or Lewis. We don't know. All right,
It's
awesome.
the added excitement. You get
That's
both.
right. That's right. That's right. So we're gonna kick off. We're gonna talk a little bit about ourselves, our lives, different stories. We'll do a video later on, I think, with more discussion about who we are as people, and but those will probably be more individual videos that we do and share with people. So I was listening to you guys kind of talk about just your life and stuff like that, and there's John talking about being, not being the best at mountain, which is our job, and that is a perfect segue into talking about my family stories, because basically my family stories revolved around either taking care of family or trying to beat him. Right there.
Yes.
That was what my childhood was. So whatever it
Emphasis on
was,
trying.
John's the next older sibling from me, so whatever he could do, I could do better was my goal. Unfortunately, not everything. I couldn't beat him in skiing until he got older and Now I can probably hang with him. Although I be honest with you, I'm out of shape now. I
Might
lost
have a
my
shot.
advantage. I lost my advantage. I got some work to do.
Got some catch up.
Yeah, well, it was the whole quarantine happened, and I was supposed to, everybody's like, oh, you're gonna be stuck at home, you're gonna work out, I'm gonna get in shape, but I did the opposite. So apparently I'm not good at working out at home. I don't know what to say about that. But yeah, the opposite happened.
Fair enough.
I found out how active my job really is. So yeah, working on that. But anyways, I could talk about things all day, but I tell you what, the biggest thing that I remember from my childhood growing up, John and I were very close, and we did everything together, and like I said earlier, basically consisted of him doing something and me trying to do it better. And I'll be honest with you, I was a sore loser. So some of my favorite stories involve being a sore loser. Sometimes it worked out well for me, sometimes it didn't. I remember playing basketball and being so upset because you could dunk by just jumping a few inches off the ground. He's taller than me, by the way. I worked my butt off to try and get to that rim, and I watch you just go up and just punk.
No, we were on a 10-foot. I will throw that out there. It was lower than 10 feet at the time.
It was, but we were younger. But even as we got older, like you always had to work less, and it was very upsetting to me. I remember the most memorable time was he went up for a dunk on me, and I undercut him on the concrete, as all wonderful younger brothers do. And then immediately, instead of facing him like a man, I ran like a baby as fast as I could to mom, because I knew that.
Was that the time I grabbed the baseball bat?
I don't
Or
know
was
what
that-
you did, because I remember I undercut you, and then it was like I saw red, I undercut you as you went up, and I knew you were going down, and I just turned and ran inside. I didn't think about it. I probably got spanked, I don't know. Well, I don't know if we were old enough that we didn't get spanked then, but it didn't matter. It wasn't going to be as bad as if you'd gotten your hands on me. So that's the story of a lot of our conflicts. Another fun one I had was when you were in a cast after breaking a leg. My favorite thing about John, he has 5 broken bones, right? Do you have more than that? 5 that I
Head.
counted.
Toe, leg.
I like that Micah can count them.
Okay, and I'm gonna teach you.
Yes, technically, yeah. So that probably 5, yeah.
Okay, so life lessons to all you younger siblings. I've broken 1 bone. It was as an infant rolling off a changing table. So I don't remember it. I had no control over it. I'm sure I just impulsively rolled, and it was a freak accident. So John has broken his. Let's see. I don't even know what order to go in, but we'll go with the leg first.
My head.
Okay.
Our older sister, who
Oh, the
shall
head.
remain nameless.
Yes. Okay, the head. The head I can't. Okay, so we should go with 4, because the head I didn't learn anything from. That wasn't his fault. He didn't actually.
You weren't born, right?
I wasn't bored. I couldn't learn yet.
I definitely couldn't learn yet.
But okay, so the first one we'll throw out. So there's 4 bones that we can learn from. So the first one is the leg. The story is that John was speeding around a blind corner, hit a man much bigger than him, and they cracked shins and broke John's leg. So lesson number 1,
Yes.
skiing.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry,
okay.
skiing around a
I
blind
was
corner.
gonna say, man, he must have been running pretty quick.
Now you know.
Blind corner, just like
But yeah, he's running full, or skiing.
Right,
And
from
he was a
Walmart,
fast
like,
skier. He likes to ski
boom.
fast and dangerous. And then he skied around a blind corner and hit a man much bigger than him and broke his leg. So lesson number 1 is don't ski fast around blind corners. I learned that lesson.
lesson.
I've never been hit by somebody skiing around a blind corner. Oh, Josiah's
Sure, the lesson wasn't be the bigger person. Like that's when John just started getting taller and taller.
Maybe that's the
That might
lesson
work
he
too.
learned.
Just small guy.
That's the lesson he took from it.
And that's why
Like-
he's taller than all of us.
Okay, so that's
Oh,
number
that's
1. Let's see here. Number 2, and again, this will not be in chronological order because I can never remember.
This actually is in chronological order.
Well, so far.
Oh, well.
But I don't
So
know if the next
far,
one
yeah.
will. The second one is the broken thumb.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. By the way, this was not even the broken thumb wasn't the issue for me. So we entered the punt, pass, and kick competition. By the way, John got 2nd place because he had 1 competitor. I was very upset
Right.
about this in his age division. I
I
got
think my
3rd
punt
place.
was negative.
Yeah, I
Your punt was what?
outdistanced him.
Negative?
Yes.
So-
my punt was negative.
What did they do? Turn around and kick it?
So the way they measure the distance is you have the distance in a straight line, and then every foot that you're off the straight line gets subtracted from your total distance. So he kicked it further to the side than he did distance-wise. So I was pretty upset because I was in a younger age division with more competition. I ended up in third, which is still good enough to move up. We both moved on to the next phase. But I ended up in third, but I think I totaled anywhere from 75 to 100 feet further than he did.
It's
So
pretty
I
bad.
outperformed. I was a little upset by that. But anyways, the sad part was we had a family vacation. We were road tripping to Oregon, I believe. And
South
we
Dakota.
found out the day that John broke his thumb, the day we were leaving, by going to the mailbox and pulling out something that said, and I believe I was the one that pulled the mail, that said, "Congratulations, you've moved on to the next round. You will be performing on this day," which was right in the middle of our vacation. I was very upset. So I never
I
made it
don't
past
even
round
remember
one.
that.
Yeah. Well, the reason John doesn't remember it is because of lesson number 2. Don't ever stick your fingers in a car door. He slammed his thumb in the car door. It's still pretty messed up, I think.
Oh yeah, it's still messed up big
Yeah,
time.
he had all kinds of fun. You spent did you have stuff done on it? Did you have to do more than just like stitches? Or was it
So
just-
so I got stitches. My nail came off, of course, and then I had to get a tetanus shot because it got slammed in the car door,
Yep.
and so I got to spend vacation with my arm in a sling, and the pain was almost as much in the first day or two from the tetanus shot as from the actual thumb. But I do remember we were in. So it was actually South Dakota. This is when we went to
Oh,
Mount
it was South
Rushmore.
Dakota? Okay,
South
yep.
Dakota.
I knew it was one of the North
And
trips.
we were in like a cabin. I think it was the first night. And our dad was a ski patrol at the time, so huge amount of medical training. And he was changing the dressing, and something caught on it. And oh my gosh, it smelled horrible. I literally saw things black out, and I was about to pass out from the pain. And it was just like I could see like things going just dark around me, and just like the whole world just getting into this little circle here.
He's,
And I'm like,
he's
oh my
about
gosh,
to pass
I'm
out.
about to faint. Thankfully, I didn't. My dad kept me from falling over. But yeah, that was a little
A
interesting.
little rough.
So yeah, that was a memorable trip. Not the ideal way to go see Mount Rushmore, but we still had a lot of fun.
Nice.
So
So, yeah. But anyways, that was lesson number 2, is don't slam your fingers in car doors. Or pay close attention. So I'm watching, okay, don't do this. Okay, now number 3 is where I'm going to get confused, because I know that you broke the toe. Was that
Yes.
number 3?
yeah, I think that was number 3.
Yeah, number 3 is he broke his toe. I don't remember what skill he was doing, but he was doing gymnastics of some sort in the... Was it not doing gymnastics? Wasn't it in the
So
sunroom?
I was doing the skill of walking through the sunroom in our house.
I thought we were doing gymnastics. See, in my mind,
No,
Well,
he was
gymnastics
doing
is
something
that.
bad.
that was
Well, he
probably
just-
my ankle. Yeah, I was walking through the sunroom and I literally stubbed my toe on the floor.
Yeah, no, I remember the
sounds
injury.
like- that's a task. It's a task. It's no easy feat. It makes
I
it
know.
sound easy.
So this whole time I've been thinking, don't do dangerous things in my sunroom because of that. And then he tells me he's walking. So don't walk in your sunroom, people. Don't do it.
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
Not if it's like ours.
Oh my god!
I mean,
that
it
room
is
was so
slanted.
crooked.
It was slanted. Yep, exactly.
Slightly.
I
Yeah,
remember.
if your sunroom has a sinkhole in it, you probably shouldn't walk in it. You might stub your toe and break it.
So the house
Yes.
we grew up, there was a little bit of foundation issues in the sunroom. So a slight slant.
Just a little bit.
It
So
may or may
anyways,
not have been because we tried to jump all over there all the time, but who knows?
Yeah. So that was lesson number 3. And it works beautifully, even though the story was actually false now that I find out. I remember it wrong. Number 4. Now, number 4, okay, remind me what number 4 is, because I don't think I have it right in my head.
Okay, so I think number 4 would be my wrist.
Okay,
I
no.
broke-
I don't
okay.
have number 4. No, I don't have it right. Okay, so tell us about number 4, because...
So number 4, I was visiting some friends in California, I think. No. I was visiting a friend in Colorado Springs. So I was living in California at the time, but I was visiting a friend in Colorado Springs. And I told them about gymnastics and I could do all this, and so I decided to do a tumbling pass on concrete. So I did round off back handspring back tuck on concrete. And this was at 19 or 20 years old. So this was 14 years ago. And I still have issues with my wrist today.
Mhm.
Now it wasn't like casted and everything like that, but it was messed up big time from that. So, and then I did mess up. I want to say another finger or something another time. I don't remember if I actually broke it or not, but
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so there
Are
you
you
go.
telling me you have to re-break your wrist to get it properly fixed?
The hard part is the issue is in the metacarpals, which are all these little bones that are in here. It's not in the humerus or the radius. It's in
Got
these.
it.
So there's really not. I mean, I've never gone to physical therapy, but it's not something where I was actually with the broken leg was a scary thing. As the doctor said, "Well, if it doesn't heal right, we're going to have to re-break your leg." And I was like, "No!"
Ooh. Yeah.
Like, I don't care about anything else. I just like, don't you dare talk about re-breaking my leg. Thankfully, Micah was not there at that doctor's appointment. It was just my mom and dad. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have said, "Oh, I'll help."
We have plenty of baseball
Got the
bats.
solution.
Nice. So yeah, anyways, sounds about 3 of the 5 bones actually were lessons, although the 4th, tumbling on concrete
Yes.
isn't the best idea. So yeah, anyways, the lesson was I learned a lot from John. I was very observant and I tried to avoid his mistakes. I still made my own, but I've only broken 1 bone, so I think, you helped me out. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad to serve. It's the duty of the older sibling to take all the danger.
That's right. He shows you the way. Both, and that's the thing. That's the awesome part. Is for me, I was always like, okay, so he's supposed to show me what to do, but he's also supposed to show me what not to do. And if I'm paying attention, I won't do those things, or I'll do it better. One of the two. Anybody else want to share some fun stories? That was kind of a long. That one turned into a long one.
Yeah. So there was a lot of fun ones. So, and like, it's fun to actually think back because, as an adult, you look back like, man, what did we do as kids? I know one of the things that we used to do all the time was, so kind of a running joke, and Josiah and Lewis can definitely share this. And if any of ask any of our other siblings, if we went to the park, just ask them, did you ever, if there was like a game of pickup football, did you ever allow Micah and John to be on the same team? So we grew up homeschooled. And so, it was not uncommon for our mom to wake up at like 7 or 8 or whatever. And Mike and I were already done with school because we'd wake up at like 6. We're like, we're just going to go to school so we can play all day. And we'd get all our work done by like 8 a.m. And then we literally spend the rest of the day in the yard playing football or two-person football, 2-person baseball. We did basketball some, but mainly the baseball and football were like, football was hands down the most.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up in a family that our family's been season ticket holders longer than any of us have been alive for the Denver Broncos.
Yep.
And still are to this day. So we grew up in a football family. And so that was something our dad taught Micah and I all these plays. So we had like numbers like, 21 through I think 35. And I don't have them all straight anymore. I still remember a few of them. But we literally would have like, all we'd have to say is like, okay, I'd just be like 21. And Mike would know, okay, he's like, I'm going to go here and go here. And it would drive other people nuts because, most people play football. You're just like randomly like, okay, you run over there. They might run there. It was like, if I told Micah, go here, I would ignore everyone else on the field. I'd just be like 3 steps back and throw the ball, and Micah would be right there. So it quickly became our siblings would inform all of the other children, you do not let the 2 of them play on the same team ever. Because pretty much whichever team had the 2 of us won, just hands down.
Yep.
Because we spent so much time playing that we always knew, and if we were on defense, we always knew like, okay, you get this person, I got this person. We figure out who are the best people on the other team. I'm like, okay, I'll rush the quarterback. You take care of that guy. We don't have to worry about the rest. It was pretty crazy. So that was a lot of fun. And he said we did everything together, and we were very competitive. Now, here's the thing that you need to understand is Micah is naturally talented in athletics. I am not. I'm just a hard worker. So he would be the only sport that I was ever better than him in was gymnastics. So I did actually win that one. I was not as important at Mountain Center. He was definitely more important than I was there by far. But I actually did go on to win a silver medal in acro, so internationally. So I did win that competition. But that was the only sport I was ever better than him was in acrobatics. Every other sport, as soon as he put effort in, he got better than I did. So I kind of like gave up for a while. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like trying so hard and he's just blowing me out of the water. But it was fun because yes, I have a scar. People ask me all the time if I had a tracheotomy. I had a Micah-otomy. He decided to shred my neck. I won't tell you the rest of the story as to why he did that. And I also won't tell you why he pushed me down the stairs in a cast, but he did. It's not like I kicked him with the cast shortly before that, but he did push me down the stairs in a cast. So this is the kind of person we're dealing with here. Well,
Right.
But no, we really did. Like, we were
Good
best
news.
friends growing up, and I mean, we did just about everything. We had a trampoline for years, so we'd be jumping on the trampoline, making up, worlds, X-Men, Matrix. I mean, we had this. It was pretty crazy. Talking about kids with an imagination. This is, it's amazing what happens. No, our dad we always had computers in the house because our dad was a huge tech person. I mean, he worked on computers before there were computers, pretty much. But so we've always had computers, but we were always limited. I say we, meaning us older children. The younger children did not get the same rules applied. But we weren't allowed to, spend a lot of time on the computers. So we had to use our imaginations. And so we had this pretty amazing imaginative world that we'd be running around the house and outside and in the trampoline and we were in gymnastics. So we're doing cartwheels and all kinds of craziness. It was pretty hilarious. So, and then we were all... I would remember this more than Lewis, but we were not real great at including the younger siblings in our games.
Go find your own things.
Wait, why would I not remember this?
Because you were a little too young. Josiah and Chris were always the ones that were like, we want to come do stuff with Mike and John, and we'd be like, no.
That's fair.
There's enough of y'all to find your own friends.
Right. Go play with Sam.
There's like 4 or 5 of you. Just go do it.
Just make it happen.
Depending on when we're starting, what the spectrum is. But I think what's interesting about all of us is that this group, John mentioned that our dad did Ski Patrol. He actually started the year I was born and did it actively for 25 years, and then not quite as actively after that. Is that all of us participated in Ski Patrol at some level with him, whether it was in the young adult program or in the national Ski Patrol level, even when we were adults. And I think for a lot of us, that was the way that we all kind of got closer to our dad, because you had that one-on-one time. We'd commute up to the ski area. And, for John and I, we started, we skied together. We were the ones that did the most skiing. We both won, outstanding awards while we were at Ski Patrol. So we could kind of bond over skiing as well. And that was something that sometimes in our family, you would have like, oh, this is my thing. I don't want anybody else to get too good at it because I want to be the best. But skiing, kind of like football, and participating in Broncos and cheering on the Broncos. And we grew up in the area when they won, their back-to-back Super Bowls. So it's easy to be a fan as a kid, right? So skiing was kind of the same way. We were always competitive. There was a brief moment in time where I was the best skier, and I was like, yes! And John generally holds the cake for that. Well, our dad generally holds the cake for that, but John was always pretty high up there. But that was, I think, something that we were a little bit less competitive on and just kind of enjoyed it together.
No, that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of good memories of skiing. Probably my favorite. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I've got one after you, though.
Okay, so I have lots of good memories of skiing, and like Josiah mentioned, that's our dad worked in consulting, so he was gone in some cases 25 to 30 plus weeks a year traveling. So a lot of the times we got to see him was on the weekends in Ski Patrol. So that was a lot of where I got to know my dad was through skiing. So I do have a lot of great memories. I think one of the most fun memories is this one day that we went up skiing. And so kind of the whole way that skiing went is our older sister and I would go up a lot. Then she started going up less. Micah would come up on occasion, but he got really bad altitude sickness. Yeah. So basically we'd be driving up in the car, we'd be pulling over, Mike would be throwing up out the side of the car, get back in. And so most of the time we'd get up to the ski area and he sometimes would ski, sometimes it wouldn't, just because it depended on how he recovered from that. So I remember this one day we go up and so we go to Loveland Basin. And Micah was a blue skier. I think maybe he'd been on a couple of blacks, but not many at this point. And so we go up and we start at the valley. And so we're up skiing at the valley. He'd been throwing up on the way up. So, right, he's throwing up on the way up. We get to the ski area. We're like, we're going to go ski. My dad's like, are you guys going to take care of Micah? I'm like, yeah, we'll make sure Micah's fine. Mm-hmm. So we go to the valley, which is like the beginner area. We go up and we go down off in the trees. We don't go on the run. We go off in the trees. And what's hilarious is Micah's fine. And then our friends that we're with, one of them just biffs it into a tree. So we all start making fun of him because we're all, like, the three of us are all pretty good skiers at this point. And so we're all worried about Micah. And then we watched the one guy biff into a tree as we were laughing at him. So then we go over and we decide to go to Lift 8, which is all advanced to expert terrain. And we go over to Lift 8 and we decide we're going to go down the plunge, which is, at the time, it's not anymore, but at the time it was the steepest run at the entirety of Loveland Basin. Micah's never been on this. I think he's maybe been on a couple of blacks, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna go down this. And I'll let Micah tell his version of the story. But so I'm all worried, like, oh my gosh, if Micah dies, I'm gonna die too because our dad's gonna kill me. So we're going down, and Micah makes it down. He's fine. He's going out, and then we watch our friend come down, and he's he's been hot rodding all day, like showing off, like, oh, look how good I am. So he gets to the bottom, and so the bottom of this run is super steep. It's super short, but it's incredibly steep. Then you get to the bottom, and there's this just really long flat spot. So you got to keep your speed up. So he gets to the bottom of the steep part, gets onto the flat spot, catches an edge, and wipes out in the middle of the flat part. So we all start busting up laughing because we're all worried about Micah, and Micah's fine, and the other guy just eats it again. So he ate it in a tree earlier in the day, and then he goes and eats it in the flat spot at the bottom of the steep run. So that was probably one of my favorite skiing memories. I'll let Micah share his impressions of that run we took him on.
Yeah, so it was the experience was definitely the same in that, like, enjoying watching him eat it. The only difference, I think, he went first. So because
did he go first? Okay.
I remember it from watching above, which was actually better. It was like watching a nice little show. Because the plunge, it's actually not as bad. Like, after I went back again and really paid attention, it's not as bad as it was because the steep part's actually at the very top, and that's where it's like, have fun going down the plunge. And so they took me around. They're being nice. They took me around kind of the side and then jumped in halfway, where it's still steep, but it wasn't as steep. But so we had kind of come around and went partway down the hill, and then John's ski buddy, who was a ski racer, I don't know if he was at the time, but he loved to go fast, came off the top part, full speed, flying down the plunge, flying full speed, hits the bottom, I think hit a patch of ice, is what I remember. And then you just see poof, and big giant poof of snow, and gloves flying off, skis flying everywhere, big old fire sale, and so then I'm sitting up here like, oh boy, I'm gonna be okay, I can do this. And then you watch this kid go flying down and just eat it, and there's two things that can happen. One, you can be like, oh no, I'm gonna die, or what I did, which was start busting up laughing because I was like, oh my god, that's hilarious. Because he's a good skier, and he would talk a big game, and then he goes down and totally eats it at the bottom, which I found hilarious. And so then instead of thinking about how I was going to die, I was laughing at this other person, and then I skied down fine. I took it slow. I was probably pretty, comparatively, you see one person going full speed, and I'm probably like, turn, stop, not too fast, going nice and slow, take my time. And I got down and out and fine. But I do remember watching him hit that bottom point and just poof. And it's kind of like a little bit of what do they call it, like Schadenfreude? Is that what when you think, oh, this guy talks a big game all the time and plays big, and then eats it skiing on a flat part of the hill? And so it was pretty funny to watch happen, for sure. It was a memorable moment.
Yep, I still don't remember to this day what I told Dad when he asked us at the end of that day. So where'd you guys go skiing? I don't remember what I said.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember if that was the first day.
Oh man.
I don't think it was the first day I did black that day.
I do remember something about lift 8 in the plunge, and he was like, you did what?
It's like, well, he's still alive.
So my story actually involves Lee, and when I started college, I didn't ski for a couple of years just because I was busy, and Lee started doing patrol, and so like Micah said, we're everyday Joes. We're a middle class family through and through, honestly. So the skis were all hand-me-downs for most of our lives. Or some patrol didn't need a skis and they gave them to us. And then occasionally, every 7 years, maybe, I don't know, I've never actually had a new pair of skis. I think most of us, if we have, it's been once in our life. Anyways,
I got my skis.
Yeah. So to say that Lee ended up using my old skis, when he was on patrol, and if you're not familiar with skis, they have what they call a dim setting on the binding, which is how tight it holds your boot in. And the heavier you are and the more advanced you are, the higher that setting goes. And the idea is for beginners, the ski releases you before you might twist an ankle or a knee. And as you get better and better, you have to be more aggressive on the steep stuff, so you need to stay in your skis. They can't pop out as easily, but you know what you're doing. So Lee is a little bit lighter than me, and I just had mine up relatively high from doing the steep. So I'm like, hey, Lee, I'm going to borrow the skis. He's like, yeah, go for it. So I take him. I'm with some friends on some blues, and they're like, Josiah, take that kicker, take that jump. I was like, oh, it's a tiny jump. I all for it. This is my first run of the day, so I speed up and take this little jump, and I'm doing all right. I didn't land great. I was a little off on one ski, but as soon as I hit click, click, both skis come out, and I just go tumbling. I was like, what happened? Like, it wasn't a great landing, but they failed right away. And so after finding my skis and finding my glasses, I look at the din, and they're like 2.5. I was like, oh my god. So get down, and you have to take a screwdriver and go up to like 7. And I don't know if I texted Lee or told him, but I was like, holy Jesus, Lee, you're good. You should be at like a 5.5 to a 6, man.
I'm not sure how they didn't pop off on, like, when I was doing some of those black runs I was doing when I was on the patrol.
Yeah.
I was like, I never touched it.
Just got on and
yeah.
went.
When you changed it, it probably stayed there. I didn't change it back.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know why they were on. I don't know why they were on such a low setting either. It could have been for a variety of reasons, but I was just like, oh my god, what's going on?
Yeah, I don't think I ever changed it. So unless someone changed it for me,
So maybe it was me this whole time.
I don't know. It could have been. I was at that point. To this day, I have never changed the setting on one of those skis. I've always just kind of used it as someone said it.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Mine or someone else's.
Yeah.
Nice.
I have another.
True hand-me-down style.
I have another
Yeah.
ski story, but I don't know if anyone else has them before I tell another one because I already told one.
I was gonna say I don't have many like skiing stories besides learning how to snowboard, and that was a feat in and of itself.
I think that's
Never have I
something
ever
allowed.
fallen on my butt so many times and just enjoyed it and hated it at the same time.
Nice.
It's kind of one of those things where you're like, oh great, I went like 3 times, but I think I've gone a total of 3 or 4 times now, and every time I come back and I'm just sore the next day because I'm like, I just fell over so much trying to learn the same thing I learned the first day I went,
Yep.
trying to relearn it.
So the question I have is, do you think it was harder to learn how to snowboard at first or ski, like the first
Definitely
couple days?
snowboard. I don't remember falling as much when I was
That's what I've
skiing. Oh my goodness.
Well,
Oh,
especially,
so many.
Just for the record, I think snowboarding is the worst thing ever, and you should definitely stop. But I mean,
I've got a snowboard downstairs. It's great. It works great. Like, new binding, sweet boots I can actually walk on. I'll race
Yeah,
you
that's
any
true.
day in boots.
The boots are
the
almost
clunk clunk.
Yeah,
almost.
you can clunk. I'll sprint. Like, all you, buddy. It's okay. Mine got Michelin tires on the bottom. I'll beat you in the snow, too.
For those of you who may not be skiers or snowboarders, so the difference is with a ski boot is completely solid with a really small hinge that moves about that much.
It's like having a cast on your foot.
Basically, imagine walking around in 2
It's like a
casts.
cast boot. If you don't know what that is, that's good. You should never find out.
And the snowboard boot is similar to think a snow boot, but a little stiffer. So it's not as flexible as like a regular snow boot, but it's not too far off of that. So you can walk around real easily. So it's a
And very
common
warm.
skiers is complaining about how painful and annoying ski boots are to transit in.
Yes, snow boots are just about as easy as any other boot, plus like 2 inconvenience levels, however you want to measure that.
So probably one of my
Sounds
favorite ski patrol stories, and this is actually, it was the worst wreck that I ever worked as a ski patroller, and I worked it while I wasn't working. So I moved to California, and I came back, and it was actually the same friend that I had wrecked my wrist showing tumbling in Colorado Springs had come up to go skiing with us, and she'd never skied before, so I'm teaching her how to ski. And so we're riding up the bunny lift at the beginner area, and so we're on the lift and we're chatting. And as we're getting up to the top, I see someone lying on the ground, and I realize shortly after I see blood on the ground. I'm like, oh my gosh, they fell off the chairlift. And so I'm on the lift, and I get up to the top, and the guy's about to stop the lift. I'm like, don't stop the lift, don't stop the lift. And so we get off the lift, and one of our other brothers, the one between Micah and Josiah, he was up with us. And so I said, hey, make sure she gets down alive. And I take off around the corner, get down there. So the kid had fallen off the chairlift and had busted up himself really bad. And so I'm like I'm not patrolling, so there's blood on the ground, and one of the first things that you learn in first aid is you have to have gloves because you need to protect yourself and other people. But primarily, you got to protect yourself. And so I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't have any first aid equipment. I don't have anything. I told one of my other brothers, probably our other brother that was with my friend, I said, call Dad, get ski patrol over here, because I'm like, I don't have anything. And Josiah was actually the first person to show up. So he was a young adult patroller. He had my old patrol vest. I'm like, give me gloves right now. And he's like looking through pockets, like, I don't know. I'm like, give me the vest. I reach over, I reach in the pocket, grab out the gloves that had been there for years, just because I'd used it so much and knew it. And it was interesting because all these patrollers, our dad shows up, the assistant patrol director, all these people have been patrollers for 20 years. And I'm not on patrol. I'm there as a civilian. I had been on patrol, but at the time I was inactive. And I'm telling him all these people what to do. Okay, so you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, and they're all just like, "Yep, whatever, John." So it was hilarious. This was like the worst thing I ever worked, and it was the day. But the favorite part of that was Josiah trying to find the gloves in the vest because he's like, "I don't know where they are."
What gloves?
Yeah, literally, like one zipper. I just reach it. I open the zipper. I pull out the gloves. It wasn't like I went searching. I'm like, I knew right where they were. So it was quite hilarious. So
yeah, and to date, that's the worst. There was another accident that was as bad, but I was only there at the very end of that accident. But that's the worst accident I've ever done. And I almost did nothing because, in the progression, you have to do CPR training, then essentially EMT training for outdoors, if you will. And I hadn't even finished the CPR training. So, for a variety of reasons, I actually couldn't really do any medical work. I could help direct traffic and keep the scene safe, but I couldn't actually help a patient at that time because I wasn't certified in anything just yet. So yeah, it was a heck of an accident to see as one of your first accidents that you'd ever been on before you'd even finished the first step of your training. Kind of when you're in that introductory phase there. But yeah, still to date the worst accident. The good news is the kid ended up being. He lived. He's certainly injured, but he definitely lived. So that was great.
Well, he actually got flown out flight for life, but he came back and he made from what I understand, a full recovery. So that was great. But yeah, that was rough. My camera's on auto zoom, and I don't know how to turn it off. So
He's working.
I might not be able to stay on super late,
yes.
But maybe it's a good time to transition to one of the other two topics.
Yes,
before...
I was going to ask you guys to choose what you want to talk about. Do you want to talk about schooling or voting? What do you want to knock out tonight?
I like both. I like the education one, but I'm also good with voting, so I'm good on either side.
Anybody else have a leaning?
Silence is deafening.
I know it is.
Silence.
The silence is deafening.
My lean is towards voting. I know it's something that a lot of people have talked about. It's nothing unique, but
yep.
Let's do it.
I'm interested in both. I'd love to talk about voting tonight because I'm curious to see kind of where it starts, and I think it'd be good to talk about again moving forward after having some discussion. I think that there's some good to be learned, but I feel the same way about schooling. But all right, we'll talk about
voting.
The importance of voting. So I put some notes down to talk about for this, but feel free to kind of chime in as we go. This is discussion, not a presentation, so don't let me be the only one talking. I don't know that much. So the first thing when it comes to talking about voting is the question a lot of especially younger people will ponder around in their head. And I'm not younger anymore, but I do the same thing, and that is, does my vote matter? And I think the cookie cutter response is yes. But then I think that the next part of that I feel like needs better discussion and better understanding is, why does it matter and how does it matter? Because everybody can say, well, if you don't vote, then obviously it's not. If everybody says, well, my vote doesn't matter, then it, it doesn't because of that. But if every one single person says my vote matters, that changes everything, and that makes sense. That logically, if all 300 million of us have the same thought and say, well, I guess technically there's not that many adults, but but if we all say, yeah, my vote matters, and we vote, then that makes a huge difference. But how can we kind of break that down more to actually help understand how your vote helps, how the system works, how to make your vote more effective, and if you want more people to understand why you're voting for what you're voting, how to articulate that. And honestly, for me as someone who's voted a few times now, the hardest part I find is how do I get information that I trust, especially this go around. And another part of the discussion is, kind of talking about local versus national voting. How do I get local information? Like, what's the easiest way to do that? Because I tell you what, the information on a presidential campaign website versus a local governors, and then even lower in the totem pole, if you're looking at something like a mayor's office, or treasurer, the lower you get, the less information there is about those people. So I think that's a good kind of area to talk in and work through, so that people who are looking to vote and figure out why my vote matters can figure out the most effective way to go about researching it. Because to me, I think voting matters, but I think the biggest hurdle that I see is to make an educated vote, which I actually think is very important, because what we do matters, especially on the local level, because our local politicians are who are going into the system and becoming our national politicians. So understanding who we're electing at a local level, I think, is more important long term, because in essence we're deciding who's going to be making it to those high levels early on. So for me, the hardest part has been, how do I get the information that I can trust? Because I'll be honest with you guys, the major news corporations I trust about as far as I can throw a 500-pound weight.
Yeah. I think there's, and maybe we have to work our way to answering that question. So I think that a lot of the misconception about does my vote matter, and when somebody tells you my vote doesn't matter, I think that you'll find that the majority of the time they're talking about the presidential election because of the Electoral College. And the first thing that they have to realize, and that maybe is important to respond, is that there's not another election that works that way. And there's a reason for it. There's not another election that's a nationwide election. So every other election, 435 of them on the federal level, are all held in a purely democratic sense. So every time you elect somebody to the House of Representatives, that's just a winner, that's just a vote majority, nothing else. Same with the Senate. It's just a statewide vote majority, nothing else. Same with your mayoral races. Same with your county commissioners. Same with your city councilmen and women. All those are just a pure democratic process for your jurisdiction. The presidential race is the only one that is different. So when you step back from that, so almost I wish people would focus more on the local elections as young voters than the presidential, because there's less media attention on it, there's less spin on it, there's less negative advertising on all of them, and it's much easier to understand. It's just whoever gets the most votes, and you're done. You're done with the day. Now, we could talk about runoffs and how those work, and I get that can be more complex. If you don't reach a certain percentage, you end up with a runoff between two people, but it's still the top vote getters. So when you take away that first helps you realize, okay, so I'm not so distracted by this one big ominous election that has too much information to possibly process, and my vote does matter as much as everybody else's. There's no difference on my vote versus the billionaire down the street's vote at this point. I think that's just so important, and I really think that people, if you didn't vote in the presidential election, but you really got focused on your local election, that could be really helpful. And the other reason for what you said, Mike, is why the local elections are important, is because if you think about your daily issues, the president can't do anything about it if they wanted to anyways. So if you have a land dispute, the president couldn't do anything even if they wanted to. If you have a local police issue, the president can't do anything even if they wanted to. That's going to be a municipal issue. If you're upset about your state taxes, the president can't change your state taxes. That's your state legislators and your governor. So all of those impact your daily life, even though they might not be on the news. All those are going to impact your daily life. If you don't like the price of emissions testing in your county, that's not the president. None of it is. So when you take the focus off of that one race, because there's more information than any human being could possibly process, I think that it can reduce the burden, especially on a new voter, when you take into account those several things. That race is different than all the others, and it impacts your daily life, sometimes less than you might notice. I get that there's a huge trickle-down effect from the president. It'd be impossible to deny. But when you take into account those things, hopefully the everyday person can take a deep breath and be like, okay, maybe I can start at a lower level and process this information and realize my vote does. So that was a lot. We could kind of unpack that any way you guys want.
I'll let Lewis go first, and I'll chime in.
I'm trying to think. Well, I guess as a younger person, as I would fit into that category, I guess. It's one of those interesting things that it's always been tricky for me, is one of those things, because there's definitely a lot going behind that. Does my vote matter? And like in the grant, like, yes, it does. It really does. So it matters, like you were saying, just as much as anyone else's. And more so than the vote, it's my opinion matters, because my opinion is exactly what my vote is supposed to entail. My vote is supposed to be the physical embodiment of my opinion that will then basically go with everyone else's, and then we'll make a decision based on that. I think the difference is it's not that right now, and that's not how people are looking at it, because right now the media turns it into, we're trying to change your opinion. Basically, they're trying to get you to think a certain way. And I think because it's all like, because of the media, a lot of it's monetized. All this money's being thrown in areas trying to change people's minds or tell them this is bad because of this whatever that may or may not even be related. They're just pulling things in to try and sway your mindset. And I think it's just for younger people, that's everything's trying to do that. Ads, everything you look at on the internet is trying to do that. All the people around you, influences at school, it's everywhere. And for them, they just see that as another thing that's trying to tell them to think differently. And it's hard to get behind that, because it's like, okay, well then in the grand scheme of things, to them, it doesn't matter, because everybody else is going to follow the media that's saying vote here or vote there, based on whichever one has more money, a larger percentage is going to vote here or there, because that's how it shakes out. And it just depends on, but the people that are saying like, okay, well, it doesn't matter, they're getting bigger. That group of people is growing so much that now it is mattering that they're not voting, because now their opinions are not valid. They're not being supported into this bigger group. And part of it is because it's just, before, when that like started, it was small enough to where it didn't really matter that the people who didn't care weren't voting. Now there's a super big majority of people that aren't voting, and it's causing problems where things are shifting in weird ways that people aren't able to kind of predict, or it's not working the way it's supposed to. And now it is a big deal, and now it does matter, all those little votes. But I think the interesting thing is, like, for at least someone that is in that category, like myself, it's like not sure where to go. And I think the difficulty is finding information that's useful. That's a huge problem now, because it's all like shadowed, whether it's in like media, because if it is big enough, it's shadowed in media. So you're dealing with all this media, and then it's super hard to find the actual information, because the media is not going to tell you. They're going to tell you what they want you to vote for, because it makes them money. And that's the kind of thing where it's like, so that general information is so overshadowed by the media that a lot of times there's no reason to push for the actual information. It's like, so where do you find it? Well, you really don't. Unless you go talk to people, or you find the people to talk to get that information, whether it be like local government agencies, stuff like that. Like, you know, if you want information on the sheriff's department, you're going to have to go talk to the sheriff's department and actually get that information. And I think that's a huge issue, because it's just the lack of the media and other sources getting information that they can then share it with people. So people have to seek the information instead. So even if it's just finding a way to share that information, like, I think that's an important step in that. And I don't know, I think for all the people that are kind of on this undecided and aren't voting, it's challenging because you need to give them a reason to vote. Because right now, I think the political scene has turned into this media fest. The media is everywhere, and it's not in a good way. Frankly, it's either this way or that way, and people don't want it to be this or that way. They want it to be a combination of everything, and that's not where the media fits in. And so you do kind of get groups that kind of mix in, and it just depends. So it really is. And the people who do kind of mix them don't really get much in terms of media, because media doesn't make money off that, but they might. Who knows? So I don't know. It's definitely a tricky topic, I guess.
Yeah, so what it sounds like, and I think I agree with you, is the feeling looking at it is it's become something that's all about winning as a party, which it's tough because I understand as the party that is your job is to put your candidate forward, and to win, and to win the presidency, win the Senate seat, win the Congress position, whatever, win the governor's race, the gubernatorial race. There we go, say it right. But I think what's happened and what's been lost is it's a game to the political parties, or at least that's the feeling. I want to say that that's that's how I feel, because I'm sure some different people have different perspectives. I am not heavily involved in any of the parties, so I can't give you an inside take. So when I say that, it feels like from the outside that it's just a game, and it's a game of whose team is going to win. How do I get people on my team? And what I see is that, talking about the ads that you're referring to, Lewis, is these are designed not to help you understand what the politician is going to be doing, like what their views are. It's designed to make you vote for them. So when these things are being put out, it doesn't feel like the discussion is, hey, I want to make sure I'm very clear about what I want to do and what my goals are. It's, we need to put something out that's going to get them to remember our name so that we win, that they vote for us because we're the most memorable. Some of it's going to be more pandering, where this is the demographic we're trying to approach, and here's how we think we can get their attention. But it feels very analytical and very deliberate as to make you vote for them, not because of what they believe in, but because of what they're putting out is just attractant. And it's all, there's a bunch of science behind it, is what it feels like. And I don't want that. I want you to tell me your views and your beliefs and what you're going to be doing in office. And if that aligns with what I want, I'll vote for you. And if it doesn't, I won't. And it's tough because we're in a position now where there's a ton of money, there's power, and our government is set up on this system of, this two-party system, and their job is to win. Whether you're in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or the Libertarian Party or the Green Party or, whatever, your job is to win. And so I don't fault those people for doing what they're doing, but as a voter, it feels very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very fake, it does not feel genuine. And so as a voter, I am not motivated to say, yes, I want to vote for this person, because I don't feel like you actually have my true interest at heart. The interesting part of this is I have met a few higher level politicians, and you sit down and have a conversation with them, and you're like, oh, you seem like a decent person. Why is the visual I get from your ads and from people and stuff, why is it so far from you as an individual? Because right now we had a 5-10 minute conversation about life, and you seem like a genuinely kind human being. And I think, to me, it comes back to, that's not the goal. The goal isn't to show you who I am as a human being. The goal is to win. And I think that can be very damaging, because if we do whatever it takes to win, we're willing to compromise to win. And once you start down that road, that's a dangerous road. Once you make one compromise, you'll make another, and you'll make another. And I'm not saying that in life we can't make compromises, but I'm saying that if you don't be careful with it, when you get to the highest level, you end up seeing people that feel very corrupt, that feel very. Uh, I'm looking for the word. It's just disingenuous. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Two-faced, disingenuous, so something where you're seeing something other than what is actually there.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I totally agree with you. That's like, I feel like that's exactly like kind of what happens, because it's like, yeah, I mean, yes, I get that it's a two-party system and the goal is to win, but the interesting thing is, like, I don't think the goal should be to win. Ultimately, yes, but the goal is to do what the people like, to literally get elected to be the voice of the people. And that should be the voice of the people, not winning. Your goal should be able to be that person. You've got the ideals. You want people to vote for you based on your ideals and the things that you're going to put forward, because they believe that's what they want at heart, what they think is best. But that's not what it is anymore. And because of that, people are like, they've got bits and pieces. This person has these pieces. This person has these pieces. Which one's best? And there have been candidates and stuff that do have the people's like beliefs at heart at the forefront. But the thing is they don't win because they're not subscribing to the parties. They're not subscribing to these things that people will vote for. And because of it, then people don't vote for those people because they don't think they can win. It's like, oh, I don't want to waste my vote. And for me, I'm like, okay, so voting for someone who actually has the ideals of the people at heart is bad because you're wasting your vote. It's like this is where it's like, I think this is where a lot of people get turned away from it. It's like, so does it matter? No, like, people won't vote for these people anyway because they think it's a waste of a vote. So it's this interesting like twist where it kind of like the system is geared towards not supporting that. And that's where I think it really has, it's kind of stuck there. It's like people won't run because they know they won't win because they don't have A, the money, and B, they're not going to be supported by the parties, so they're not going to get the parties' votes. And it's kind of one of those interesting things where it's like, it's kind of a system that's extremely hard to find your way in, especially on like once you start to get higher up on the local levels, and especially like national presidential stuff. That's when it starts to get really difficult. Yeah. So
I think I want to read a quote, and I think that this is really valuable. I'm not going to say who it's from because then people will be like, oh, I'm not going to listen to this because I'm a Democrat or a Republican or whoever. So I'm not going to tell you who said it. I'm just going to read it. And it says, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day, we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like to live in the United States where men were free. And the thing is the United States it's less of an anomaly now because other places in the world have caught on to how it's worked here. But there was a time where it was a very unique concept that we have a constitutional republic, not a democracy, a constitutional republic. But this was a very different idea that the people's voice actually mattered. If you look back at 1776, the reason we actually have a country, the United States of America, is because the British government decided that the voice of the colonists that were in America, which was a colony of Great Britain, they chose to say that their voice did not matter. And a war was fought and a country was founded based on the principles of the voice of the people actually matters. So to address Lewis's point, you're absolutely right. The voice of the people is supposed to matter. That's what it is supposed to be about. Mm-hmm. And I think that you guys hit it very well, that everyone gets so focused on the national elections and the large levels, and it's such a mess there. And I don't disagree that it's important, but to get kind of what Josiah talked about is that really where it matters is on that local level. And I can especially say this because I do serve in local politics. I did run in a race to be elected, so I am a local official. And we are the ones who set the budget. And that budget, depending on how that budget is set and what is put in that, depending on the revenues and our incomes, those affect the property taxes that come in. So when you go and have your every year your house is assessed and based on the budget that's passed by your county, that's passed by your local municipality, that's what determines what your tax rate is going to be on your home. Now, in our municipality, we have done very well to try and keep the portion that we are charging to our constituents fairly low. but those are the ones that determine what your sales tax prices are going to be.
Yeah.
In the case of our local municipality, the elected officials are the ones who have the ultimate decision making in what the local utilities in terms of water, sewer, what those prices are going to be. They set the direction for the town. Is it going to grow? Are you going to have businesses? Are you not going to have businesses? What types of businesses are you going to have? Are churches going to be allowed? Are they not going to be allowed? Are we going to make life difficult for churches? Are we going to make it easy for churches? These are, and we can talk all we want about, oh, well, there's no freedom of religion, or there's freedom of this, or we're freedom of that on a national level. And it's one thing to say, okay, the president believes this or doesn't believe that, but the president's not going to be the one who's going to run the zoning in your local town. That's going to be your local city council, your county commissioners, or in my case, it's a board of trustees. And in that case, they are the ones who make those decisions when there's a zoning option and a church is trying to build a property. In a lot of cases, it's that board or city council that's making the call as to, yes, we will or will not allow that to build there. And so people, I think, put way too much focus, and then they don't vote in those local elections, but then they get very angry and upset when they say, well, I can't believe they're doing this, or my taxes went up, or they raised this rate, or they raised that price. And the thing is you had the opportunity. I think it's something our father taught us early on is, if you need to vote, because if you don't vote, then I'm sorry, you can't complain. You had your opportunity to make your voice heard and you didn't say anything. He's like, if you want it, he's like, vote. As long as you vote, complain all you want, because you actually went and tried to make a difference. You let your voice be heard. And then as far as getting information, and this is where I know it's not as easily accessible, especially in this technology age, but the most effective way to learn is to actually sit down and talk with someone.
Yeah.
And this is my personal opinion. I think Lewis shared it very well, is my job as a politician, not a politician, but as an elected official. My job as an elected official is to be the voice of the people. Yes, my job is to make policy, to set the budget, to set the vision and the direction for our town. But first and foremost, so when you look at our town, you have at the top level, you have the citizens. And then underneath the citizens, you have the board of trustees and the mayor. And then under the mayor and the board of trustees, you have our town administrator. And then under our town administrator, we have all of the town staff who carry out the day-to-day operations. But if you look at the org chart for our town, everything starts with the citizens, and we answer to the citizens. So my job is really to make sure that I am understanding the views, the desires, in the direction that our citizens want our town to go, and to try and implement that. Now, there are times where there may be things where I may see things that they don't, and then in that case, it's not my job to say, well, you don't understand, therefore we're going to do this. As I look at it, it's my job is to help to explain, to help them understand, okay, here's why we need to look at this. Here's information that maybe you don't have. And how can we find a way to mix these two ideas together, right? How can we find that balance? And the best way to really get to that is to sit down and meet the candidates. So that's where I'd really encourage people is look for options where there's going to be a forum. A lot of candidates nowadays will do like a meet and greet or coffee meeting and go to that. I mean, I had the opportunity in our local county election. One of the candidates threw she held just a coffee meeting. I went and met with her and we had a great conversation. And because of that, that really helped me to make a decision on who I was going to support in that race. And it wasn't because of all the things she said. It was because I knew there were some very things that were important to me. And in just the conversation, as she was explaining her vision and her goals and the things that she wanted to do, I realized without me having to say anything, she was answering the areas that I thought were important in an elected official. And I had conversations with other elected officials that I think will do a great job. But what was interesting, as much as I agreed with 90% of what they said, they never brought up those key things that I thought were important. And it's one thing, right? If I say it to you and say, well, do you think this is important? Of course they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
But the question is it's not that you tell them, here's what I'm looking for. Do you believe in this? Is you say, what's your vision? What's your goal? What do you want to see? Like that was my favorite question when people asked me, John, what do you want to see? I said, my goal is really to be the voice of the people. I said, that's my goal. I don't come into this with a long background. My goal is what I looked at it is I started attending, and I also tell people, attend your local board of trustees or city council meetings. Get to know what's going on in your town, because there might be a lot of things happening that would actually impact you quite a bit that you should know about. But I started attending those local meetings, and one of the frustrations that I had as I was going to these meetings is it was so hard to find out where do I go for information, right? How do I find out what time the meetings are, or where do I find the minutes, or how do I find the agendas, or, you know, they'd be voting on something like, how did you guys know you didn't even talk about this? And I learned, oh, there's another meeting that they talked about all this in. When is that meeting? And so it was very difficult for me to learn. And so now what I realized is I could be frustrated and upset, and I can come in and say, why, you guys need to do this, or you need to do that. And I realized, or I can put in the work, I can run for office, and then I can come in and I can help create that. Because I see that there's a gap here where they're doing great work, they're moving a good direction, they're working hard, they're trying to make the best decisions they can, but there's a gap here. And I realized I can either complain about the gap or I can help fill the gap. And so I came in and I said, hey, and that was my whole campaign, is I said, I'm going to come in and I'm going to communicate with you. And it was fun because some people were like, yeah, right, everyone says that. And then, you know, I've been in office for, I think, 3 months, 4 months now. And shocker, I still communicate with people all the time. And I mean, it's been great because people are finally starting to realize, oh, he was serious about that when he said he's going to try to talk to us. But, you know, have those conversations, because it's even better when you can have them one-on-one, which you can do at a local level, right? You're not going to get a presidential candidate to come and talk to you one-on-one. Sorry, it's probably not going to happen. Yeah. And be real, right? With a local mayor candidate or mayoral or, you know, city council, and those honestly are going to have the biggest impact on your life, that's not going to be hard to get a chance to talk with them one-on-one. Yes, maybe if you're in a town of multi-millions of people in New York, it might be a little more difficult to do that. But you can still work to do that. And then also, if it's someone who has been in office before, go and look at their voting record. People can talk until they're blue in the face, but actions speak 1,000 times louder than words. If they say, I'm all about, you know, a balanced budget and this and that, and really being wise with taxpayer dollars, well, go look, and if they've been in office, go look, what have they done? And if their record supports that, then fantastic. If the record is 180 degrees opposite, then you realize, okay, well, they're saying this, but I think they're feeding me a line.
Yeah.
So I wonder, so I mean, we could continue to make the argument for why your vote matters, and maybe that would be redundant with this crowd, because I think the bigger issue you guys hit on is being inundated with the advertisement and the way that campaigns go and how that is demoralizing to people. So the only thing I'll say is, not maybe for anybody else, is that from a really practical standpoint, if you have specific values and you're a Republican in California or a Democrat in Wyoming and you're worried about your vote not mattering in the presidential election, one of the things to keep in mind is that the parties, so if you're a Republican in California, your the electoral college is almost certainly going to vote for a Democrat in today's age, but maybe they can flip your state house seat or your congressional seat where you're at. And that the party absolutely looks at how it broke down precinct to precinct, county to county. So even in that presidential election, if you eventually want a Republican in California or a Democrat in Wyoming, that vote still counts, and your party is responsible to spend that money in a way that they think they can win. So maybe your vote helped them decide where to spend their money to get the majority in the House of Representatives. So that's from a purely practical standpoint. Another level that people maybe don't think about is that your vote guides money for the values that you believe in. But going back to the media thing, that is probably the hardest hurdle for people to jump over. And the media is in the business of making money. That's fine, honestly. Mm-hmm. So I think the problem, again, is much less in the local level. So you don't have nearly as much to sift through. And honestly, with the amount of information you have to tackle, every politician is trying to give you the bullet points that you can take in. And as human beings, we want a this or that. This versus this. That's the easiest decision to make, and that's why it's presented to people that way, because it's the easiest decision to make. So obviously, I mean, checking out both sides' campaign websites can be fine, because then you get the same level of bias from both sides. So okay, here's the lean this way, here's the lean that way. Great, and take it for what it's worth. But the local elections are going to have so much less information, so much less bias from third parties going on, that you'll be
Yeah.
able to take that in. There's websites like Ballotpedia that is a curated a website that allows you to look at a variety of candidates and issues and just gives you links to articles. It's like Wikipedia, but actually not for nobody can just enter in to it, and it's maintained and gives you links to the references that they make. So that can be a great way to get a 10-minute history on the person that you're looking at. So Ballotpedia is one spot that could be a good starting point to look up a few candidates you have going on there, or a specific issue. And for breaking down things, being a one-issue voter is a decision that you have to make. Maybe it's not the right decision for you, but if you have deal breakers in your voting, honestly, that makes it easier too. Like if there's really something that you just can't abide by, and some candidates for it or against that thing, then that decision's been made for you. And voting for somebody who is not 100% what you want is a good thing, because if I ran today, I wouldn't be 100% anybody's candidate, and you won't either. I've never voted for somebody who I thought was 100% my candidate. It'll never happen. It's impossible. And as far as the media goes, I guess I can make a larger argument. With our rights come duties. So you have the right to trial by jury. You have jury duty.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have the right to vote. So there's a duty for us to maintain those rights. There's implicit duties. They're implied. So you have a right to vote. If nobody exercises it, it will eventually go away.
Mm-hmm.
So to maintain our democracy, there are rights and there are duties. And with voting comes a certain level of duty to be able to do your research. And in this day and age, you have access to more information and more responsibility to sift through it. And your candidates are a representation of their constituents. Whether you decided to vote or not, you contributed to that person getting elected. If you're partisan to the right, you contributed to that. If you're partisan to the left, you contributed to that. So even when you don't vote, that's a representation of why that person got elected. So you have to realize that's your duty. If you choose not to vote, you help that person get elected.
Mm.
That person represents their community. Even if it's a 30% turnout, they represent a community that only turns out 30%.
Yep.
And so we have that responsibility, and the media definitely doesn't make it easy. And maybe, I don't know that I have a good solution to that other than to take in media from both sides. So that's what I do, is I take in partisan media from both sides.
Mm.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's lots of ways to get around that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
from
go
kind of listening is, for me, the way you work with the media, because from our discussion here, and I think we're in agreement that small government matters more than the big government, and by that I mean your local government matters more than the national government, because every local government filters into the national government. And so for me, when it comes to the media, you're going to find a lot less, not necessarily biased, but you're going to find much more legitimate information and useful information in a local election versus a national election. There's less money, there's less corruption. It's going to be a lot easier to find reliable information. So to me, the thing that has to change is people have to, one, understand that it matters more on a local level than a national level. Because I think right now, in a general view of voting, when I say, "Oh, who did you vote for?" Because come November,
First thought,
we're gonna get this long ballot with tons of names on it, and I'm gonna look at it and not know half of them.
Yep.
But when people say, "Who did you vote for?" they obviously mean, did you vote for Biden or did you vote for Trump in 2020?
Mm.
That's what. But that mindset is what I think is part of the issue with where we're at. Is we don't look at all of the whole ballot. I don't enjoy looking at the whole ballot. Just a lot of stuff. But like you
Yes.
said, with our rights come duties. And I think if the mindset can change over the next couple of generations, because what we're talking about today isn't going to take full effect. Like, people making these choices is going to take generation to change, in my opinion, because the system has been set fairly well for a long time, and the media has a lot of influence. But I think if we stop thinking about it on a national level so much, and say the local level is where we build our national level from, then I think that we can find legitimate sources a little bit easier because there's less fake at a local level. But then I think from there it's how do we find those sources? So, for you, John, you're talking about how Wellington, it was hard to know when those meetings were happening, where those meetups happening.
Yep.
So then the question becomes for our different local areas. I'm further south than actually, Josiah, are you further south than me? I can't remember.
I'm still in Fort Collins.
Okay.
Just
so
so
you're all, but we're in three different cities. So each city's going to have a little bit of different way to find that information, but then it's for your local government, whether it's John or Josiah or Lewis or someone watching this, the hard part's going to be how can you find those resources, and I think it's on us as individuals to find for our help find for our cities. How do we find that information and share it? So if I want more people in my area to vote, I need to go. One of the things I can do is say, here's how I find the information, and go share that on social media. Hey, vote's coming up. Here's how you can find information on blah 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 blah.
Yep.
It sounds like Ballotpedia, and that's actually somewhere I haven't been. So I was like, oh, look that down as a resource. What are these resources that I can share out that's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's just information. Here's how you can find information on your local politicians so that you can research them and know who you're going to vote for. Because that's half the battle. Because there's two reasons. One, I think what you said, Lee, where it's just like I feel like I'm voting for a broken system, right?
Yeah.
So why would I vote for that? That feeling. But the other half of it is if I look at a ballot and say I don't know these people, why I shouldn't be voting. I don't know who I'm voting for.
Yeah.
If I just pick names because they look familiar, I don't actually know what I'm voting for. So instead of taking on that overwhelming task, I just say, well, I'm not going to vote because I'd rather not be wrong. Rather
not accidentally support something you really didn't want to.
Yeah. As opposed to I can just say I can claim ignorance and say I just don't know. I think that's how people feel. One of those two things is when they don't vote is either I don't want to be wrong or it doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference.
For sure.
So I think that what we're talking about today and I think what I wrote it down when you said it, Josiah, was your rights come with duties, and I think that that's an important thing for people to understand that we're giving up our freedom to two parties, in my opinion, right now. When it comes to the national scale, we've given up our rights to these two parties. They decide how it ebbs and flows. Whether and I say I'm just picking topics, we don't have to talk about it, but where abortion happens, where that lies, that right that we have is in the hands of two parties. Whether you're pro-life or you're pro-choice, your choice is dependent on you voting for a Republican or a Democrat. And that's what the media wants you to think, because then you're going to keep in that train. That's what the parties want you. Yeah, and I think that that's a big problem because it's not. It's your choice. It's your choice to make how you feel about that. You vote on it, and again, it comes back to how you vote on a local level, the people that you're putting in office, So I think that giving people those resources and being responsible as adults and saying we need to help people see that information and go to our local governments and say we need this information. When it's time to vote, I want to be able to find who I'm voting for. I want to be able to know about them. I want to learn about them. Now that we're in the age of coronavirus, I need to be able to find that information online because you're not going to be holding a meet and greet with 300 people coming to learn about you.
Nope, but people do that on Zoom now, though.
Yeah.
So there still are Yep.
Yeah, so I need that information. Where can I find that information?
Yep.
And now that it's online, I honestly actually think it's less of an excuse for us as voters because
Absolutely.
It's way easier to sit down in my pajamas and hop on a Zoom call and leave my camera off than it is to get dressed up, get clean, and drive somewhere and sit down
Oh, yeah.
and engage. So I think there's even less of an excuse for us. The key is, as individuals in our local areas, we have to kind of push people to say, hey, I need this information. Or if it's already accessible, get it out there and say, hey, it's this easy to learn about your local politicians. Do this.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
here's the Zoom meetings, here's blah, blah, blah. Check it out.
Yeah, and if you have the time, just throwing it into the ether is that most cities will have their city council meetings recorded and online. Now, you might not have 2 hours to listen to the city council meeting, but you can look through their minutes and you can listen to it. So it's something. I mean, to deal with the stress and the dread of so. On our ballots in the county level, you get a lot of questions like, should I retain this judge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you make a checklist, make a voter checklist, and you say, these are the things that are important to me, and these are the races that impact those things. And you know what? For that year, only vote for those things. So if you decide president, state house, and judges are the important thing to you, then don't vote in the governor's race. Don't vote on Proposition 40 whatever. That's okay if you're going to make progress. That's like a Christian being mad at somebody for coming to church only on Easter. You should, if you're a Christian, you should be saying, "Hey, we're happy you're here on a Sunday." Like if you come to church, that's great. So, and then maybe next year you add in the Senate race, and then the year after that, you're like, "Okay, I've got those 5 races. This year I'm going to add on the mayoral race." Okay, now I know who the incumbent senator is 6 years later. Now you know who the incumbent is. You only have one candidate to research if the incumbent runs again. So you can make a voter checklist that starts with what's important to you, what offices affect that, and then each election, try to tag on one more. And so it's not, if you don't know whether the judge should be retained or not, maybe, God forbid, you don't circle either box.
Mm.
I'm not even advocating for that, but I'm saying that if you're really struggling, it's okay to take your steps up the chain and to deal with that. If you're in a gridlock situation where you're just not voting at all, I'd rather you vote for only 2 things than 0.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that. I do want to share something, and this is kind of goes back to the quote I shared earlier about right that we have, the freedoms that we have. We have to vote for those. And I understand that it is a challenge, and don't get me wrong, right? I had to get elected to start fixing some of those challenges. So I understand the struggle is real, but I think that we really, if we honestly take a step back and we look at the reality of our situation, if you look back 250 years ago, almost exactly 250 years ago, what was it that they had to do for their rights? People were willing to go to war and die. They lost their lives, they lost their property, their friends, their families. And this has happened multiple times. This isn't just happened with the Revolutionary War, but we'll just look at the Revolutionary War. People were willing to give their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to fight for the rights that we have today. You and I are being asked to spend, God forbid, you have to spend 20 hours researching for the election. Sorry, but really, I'm not sorry, right? I'm not sorry, and I'm a millennial, so I can throw some shade at millennials because I am one. But I'm sorry, millennials, that you have to take 20 hours to go and actually do some research to understand so that you can vote. When you look at that in the perspective of people that 250 years ago had to die so that you could have the right to vote today, I'm pretty sure you can agree with me that your 20 hours is not that big of a sacrifice. Because I can't speak for everyone else out there, but right, what do I normally spend that 20 hours on? Whether it's reading books or watching a movie or a video game or whatever, right? There's a lot of things to do, and some of them are very good things, right? Spending time with my wife, spending time with my kids, going to church. There's a lot of good things to do. But if you were to really take and look at your life over a week, I'll bet you that most people could find 3 hours a week, and you spend a month doing your research, and guess what? You got 3 hours, find 3 hours a week, which if you spread that out over 7 days in a week, that is that's roughly a half an hour a week or half an hour a day. So 30 minutes out of a day that you spend doing this research, and in a month, little over a month, you'd have 15, 20 hours. And that's plenty of time for you to go through and know who are the people that I'm going to be choosing, who am I going to be selecting. And that's all you got to do is half an hour a day. It really is. It sounds big. It sounds scary. I get that. But if you really put it into perspective to what other people have had to do, because you need to ask yourself the question, what is the outcome if you stop? And I say you as in all of it, right? Because really the concern that we have is you look at America right now, as everyone says, oh, well, it's all of the boomers and the Gen X, and they're just making all the decisions because millennials and Gen Z don't go vote, right? They protest, we make a lot of noise, but they don't vote. Well, the boomers and the older generations they're starting to pass away, right? We're losing them. Our dad was the tail end, or I guess he wasn't quite a boomer, right on the edge, but we lost our dad a couple of years ago, right? It's starting to happen where we're losing that generation. And so we are not far from the point where the future of our country will be in the hands of millennials and Gen Z. We are not far from that point. And the question is do you want to live in a country like so many others in the world where you don't get to say in what the government does? The government tells you what to do and you have no choice. There are a lot of countries around the world where you as a citizen have absolutely no say. We look at some of the countries over to the east, and you look at that, and it's, there's different versions of the truth that are told in that country, right? There are certain things that are historical facts that you are not allowed to know as a citizen because it disagrees with what the government says. And you got to ask yourself, and I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're a Democrat, it doesn't matter. It's not about whether Republicans are right or not. I mean, Democrats, how would you feel if it was the Republicans got to tell you and you had to do whatever the Republicans say? You'd be ticked. And the same flip side, if you're a Republican, you would be ticked if the Democrats got to tell you everything that you could do and you had no way to do anything about it. If you disagree, they could lock you up in jail or kill you. And I don't think if anyone is being honest with themselves, that is a country they want to live in. But that is the country that you will get if you are not willing to actually step up and do the work. And in this case, right, 250 years ago, people had to die to get out of that, right? People were willing to die to get out of that. We're being asked to vote, right? We're being asked to make an educated decision. We're being asked to actually take some time and get involved. And I get it. The systems, there's problems, there's things to fix. I get that. It's not easy. But as we've been saying, is really if you focus on the local level first, because I get it, right? You're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to change the whole country. No, well, don't focus on trying to change the whole country. I mean, could you imagine if 2 or 3, let's call it millennials and Gen Z, right? We'll talk about the younger generations that are going to kind of set the tone here in a few years. If a few, let's call it 5, we'll go 5, we'll go more than 2 or 3, were to just focus on their local town and community, get involved in the politics, in what's going on, in really helping educate people. Can you imagine what our communities across the country would look like in the next 10 to 15 years? You could legitimately see a huge change in just 15 years from a few people taking the time to actually help people get educated, invest into their local community. Not like, oh, I'm going to go try and change Washington. I'm going to go try and change all that. Because what happens is if you change Wellington and you change Fort Collins and you change Loveland and you change Windsor, well, then you change Larimer County. You change Larimer County, you change Weld County, you change Boulder County. Oh, good luck with that one. But you change Boulder County. And then you start making impact in Denver County. Before you know it, you've changed the state of Colorado. You change Colorado, you change Wyoming, you change, and it goes from there. And that's not going to happen in 15 years. But that will happen over time. And you have to start local and have that vision of, okay, let's work towards, and it can go either way, right? I'm not saying it's changes for better. Change can be for better or worse. Change is change. It can be good, it can be bad. I'm not saying it's going to always be a good change. But if you have the view that we're going to actually go and make focus locally, that's where you do have that opportunity. You can make the change. But if you're so focused on how broken the entirety of the system is, it's difficult, and then you don't ever start, right? And then you look back 20, 30, 40 years from now, and people are asking the question, how did we get here? And the answer is a few good people chose to do nothing. Because the thing is if you look back in history, the majority never. People always say it's all about the majority, and there's a different discussion. We don't live in a democracy; we live in a constitutional republic. There is a difference, Josiah. But
Right.
the majority, in the most case, almost never matters. Like, yes, in elections and things like that, yes. But if you look back at the Revolutionary War, I want to say that 2% of the colonists in America actually fought in a Revolutionary War. And in the Civil War, I think it was like 2 to 5% actually fought in the Civil War. When you actually look at the percentages of the massive things that have changed our country, it was a minority, like I mean, we're not talking like 49% versus 51. It was like 2% actually made the changes that shaped our country. So it's not that there has to be this massive amount of people that are going to do something, because 2 people that'll actually stand up and do something are going to do way more than 100 people that are just going to sit there and do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go here pretty soon, but
Yeah.
I hope, and I wish I had, I think it's good that we talked, Micah and Leah especially, because what you brought in my perspective on is I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to convince people in a logical way, like your vote matters. And you and Leah, at least, I don't think need convincing in that way. What you're talking about is problems with the system, problems with the media bias that drive people away from voting, and certainly from voting consistently. And I don't think that I've spent as much time thinking about how can I encourage people, give them a shove, give them words of encouragement, give them more tools. I've just thought about how can I logically convince them that yes, it absolutely matters. And you guys are bringing up a great point that a lot of people don't need that logical convincing. They need tips and tricks and information on how to navigate the most information we've ever had in the history of the world, plunged on them from all sides. And that's so it's something that I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board and be like, how can I approach this in an encouraging, helpful way that's not just, convincing them. And I hope that people will consider primary elections as well. I had a friend who in the presidential election in 2020, he had a value that was really important to him. And he didn't realize that one of the primary candidates had exactly that same value, word for word. And he's like, what? There was a person who represented me? And I was like, oh, yeah, man. And I was like, hey, you know what? That's okay. But next time, make sure you check out the primaries, too. You might find that there's a candidate that you love in the primary. And if they don't win, you're not going to win them all. I'm sorry. I know it's disappointing. Don't get too discouraged. But I hope people will check those out, too, as another avenue for more options. And the good news is, the right wing and the left wing have a huge spectrum. So, a center Republican is very different from a far right Republican is very different from a center Democrat versus far left or libertarian. Anyways, I'm about to go down a rabbit hole. But hopefully the things that are encouraging and offer more options and a little bit of hope.
Yes. Primaries, and then if your state has them, caucus and assembly as well, because you talk about your vote matters. I mean, when you get into that, you can talk about, in a lot of cases, you may have 50 to 100 people deciding who your candidate is going to be for a commissioner spot, for a state representative. It really is. Like, you want to talk about where your vote really, like, you can tell it matters. Just to give you an idea of how their caucus works here in this area, in our area that my wife and I were part of, so we got to attend for the first time here in Colorado in the caucus, and it was me, my wife, one other couple, and one other gal out of 1,000. So caucus is broken up into groups of 1,000. So out of 1,000 registered voters that were in our portion, there was 5 of us that kind of got to decide, here's how we're going to vote, here's the candidates we're going to throw our support behind, and then that goes in with the other precincts. And in our area, I think there was a total of 8 or 10. No, I don't even think it was 10. I think it was like 7 or 8. So out of that, there were 7 or 8. So we got to, if you think about in our area, we basically, the 5 of us got to determine 25% of the vote of our local precinct. So if you think about that per person, I got to represent 5%. Now you talk about, when you go into the presidential debate and you're like, you're 0.00000. I don't know how far you got to go to how much of a percentage your vote makes on that. But when you start talking about the caucus level, if you do have a caucus, not everywhere does, it's huge. Your vote incredibly matters because you can entirely shape the direction that a primary goes, whether there even is a primary, as well as who's going to be on the ballot in November. So I really would recommend people, and especially if you have a candidate that really agrees with your philosophy, and this is where it helps to know early, that might be their shot at getting on. They may not be popular enough to win the popular vote, but they have the right values that they would have those voters that are educated, because generally that's the people that show up at the caucus. Right? Those are the people that have taken the time they care about what's going on. They've done their research. They know the candidates, and they think this is the best candidate for us to put up in November because I think they'll bring the things that we need. And so you get to be a part of that process of deciding who is going to be on the ballot in November. So caucuses and then primaries, if there is a primary, as Josiah mentioned, that's your opportunity to decide who will be on that ballot in November. And that can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts, Mike or Lee? I know John and I have been talking a lot before.
I know.
Yeah. See if I can not lose my thoughts. Oh, geez, I'm gonna lose it. I was thinking about I got it back. Okay, we're good. So for doing research, for putting in your time to do research, you're talking about putting in, trying to put in 20 hours in a month. And one of the things that I learned kind of early on in my process of trying to actually put time into it was I tried to replace my downtime with research time. And I work a job. I keep busy. I think all of us do. And so when I replace my downtime with something that matters and is really important and needs a lot of focus and attention, it changes how I feel about it. Because I'm mentally my mind's like, okay, time to chill out. And everybody's is different. Maybe it's playing video games, maybe it's reading a book, maybe it's watching Netflix and chill. But if you replace that time, make sure you purposefully do it and say, this is no longer downtime, this is mental work. Because you have to be ready to read and try to understand something that's not going to make sense. Reading through the different amendments and the different proposals that are going through for our counties and our ballots is mind-numbing because they fill it with garbage, in my opinion, and then inside that garbage is actually what they're trying to say, which is kind of frustrating. But that's why you do it, because you can understand that these are the people doing it. Anyways, before I get off on a rabbit trail, making sure that time you're committing is in your head. This is work. This isn't chilling time. This isn't downtime. It might replace that, but it's actually I'm doing extra work. And that I think for different people will mean different things. So if I really need my downtime, so mentally I max myself out and I need my downtime, well then you need to replace something else that's more work-related time, whether it's mowing your lawn if you own a house, or maybe it's doing some research for something that, hey, I can put that off today and focus on the election work. I can focus on who I'm voting for. And then the other thing is time chunks. You talk about you could be as little as a half hour a day. Well, I'll tell you what, if I'm the one doing the research, in a half hour, I'm going to have time to figure out who I want to research and the avenue with which I'm going to research them and believe it's trustworthy, and then I'm out of time. And for me, that drives me nuts. Now, different people work in different ways. You could say, hey, okay, I found this information. Tomorrow I'll read through it. That drives me nuts. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just made progress. Now I need to make more. So for me, I put aside 2 to 3 hours because I know I have to get a certain amount done, or else I'll get really upset with myself, or I'll push whatever else was supposed to happen next aside and keep going. So even though we talk about saying the sacrifice that you're making isn't great compared to what other people had to make, which is true, the sacrifice we make is much less. It's still great to us because you've built your life around your current day. Like your lifestyle is what it is already. So if you're not
Yep.
somebody who's regularly voting, that's not part of your life. You're going to have to change a part of your life to make that a part of your daily routine or your weekly or monthly, however involved you are. You have to make that adjustment lifestyle wise. So be thoughtful in how you do that, because just like someone who wants to lose some weight and goes on a diet, if you make drastic changes for a short amount of time, you get drastic results for a short amount of time, and then everything goes back. So it has to be a change in your lifestyle, and it has to be thoughtful and understanding that I'm committing to this. And part of that decision, I feel like, is being invested in what's happening. So listening to with rights comes responsibility, and saying and taking that to heart and understanding that I am responsible for helping make these choices. Because if you're not sold on that, you won't stick with it. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the choice you're making. Just, I think for people to understand is you are making a choice to either be involved or not. And at the end of the day, you have to decide if that's what you want. The hope, I think, in discussing this is to help people see and understand the value of it so that they can feel good about making the decision to become involved. Because at the end of the day, there is a lot of garbage to sift through, especially on the national level, which I think is a great reason to start on the local level, because there's less.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's still a decision to change your life, and to put yourself out there and say, okay, I'm going to start voting for people, and I'm probably going to pick somebody that down the road I might actually feel like, oh, I shouldn't have voted for that person. But that's part of the responsibility that we have, to uphold our rights, is to do the work and to be ready to make those mistakes and learn from them and try to find people. And I think that if we have that mindset where it's not, I think one of the things that put me off is, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, Lee, is I talked to somebody about not wanting to vote for either side, and this was years ago, and they said, well, you're throwing your vote away. And my response was, so you're telling me that I think morally both of these people are reprehensible, and I very much dislike them, but if I don't vote for one of them, I'm in the wrong. My parents raised me to look up to leaders that are good role models. So by not supporting what I believe to be poor role models, I'm a bad person, or I'm not doing it right. And they didn't really have a response to that. And I was like, this is what you're telling me. And so what I want people that are thinking about it to think about is, I'm not telling you that if you don't vote, you're a bad person. I'm telling you that if we want to see positive change, then we have to learn more about the people we're voting for. We have to find good people, and we have to vote for them. Because if we let things go, we're seeing what the two-party system, what the government, what the media, and I say media because I think the media has such a huge role in what's happening. We've seen what their agenda is. And so I think that it's up to us to make the decision as to how we go from here. And I think I just really want to encourage, especially young people that aren't voting, is it's not that you feel like you're throwing your vote away because you don't have enough information, and all the information you have to go off of is telling you that this is just not worth it. So hopefully this will help, but look for more information. Look for people who will give you real information to help you understand better how the system works and how you can make a difference by voting. And then the last thing I would say is this is not a short-term thing. It's not. We're not going to see the fruits of our labor for decades. You may see little bits, I think, as you go, but truly on the national stage, you won't see it for decades. So this isn't just about you. This is about you and your family, your kids, if you have them, or future generations. And that has to be more of your mindset, because otherwise you're going to be frustrated in 10 years and give up.
Yep.
And that's actually the part that demoralizes me, if anything.
That's another conversation.
I think one of the things you're talking about, it makes a lot of sense, the way you were putting it. I guess one of the things that for me is still one of those one of these things which kind of it's a melding of all of it is together. Is it's like, I guess for me, because the system, I think it's been so broken, and I think a lot of people do, is the system so broken that the information that people are able to get is so skewed, because the information that people want, or the information that the media wants, and it's not the real information people are looking for. So in order to get that real information, a lot of times you have to go and talk to the candidates, meet the candidates, and meet them face to face, where they're not responding to questions that the media is asking them. And then those are getting answered, or filling out a sheet of paper saying like, what are you going to support? Something like that, where they're actually putting detailed information into, okay, this is what I think on this area. So in a lot of ways, it's depending on the candidate. At least when you go out to vote, it depends a lot on the candidate, because certain candidates will put information, what they believe in about things that they're not even asked about, because to them, it's an important piece of them describing themselves as someone that's going to support the people around them. And a lot of candidates don't do that. And the people that do don't get media attention, because it's not, again, we've talked about that. The media's hunting for money and whatever's going to get them the most attention, which that's not it right now. I think at some point it will be. And then that'll be when the change really starts to pick up pace, because then the media is going to bite, and they're going to be like, oh, there's money in this, so we'll follow this trail. But I think that's kind of hard, because a lot of times it's dependent on the candidate and to get that information. So sometimes we won't even find that information online. So I think it's hard to, okay, so then I can't find information online that's really pertinent to me making a decision. How am I still supposed to make that decision? And say, like, right now, I'm not really able to go out and meet the candidates at a meet and greet, or I could send them an email and hope for a response. And depending, again, on where they are in the ladder, you may or may not get anything. So it really depends, which I think a lot in lower, and like you guys were saying, local ones, you might get a response. And that's like the thing is, you know, if one person sends them an email, you're probably going to get a response. It's different because, you know, the higher they get, they're getting hundreds of emails, and then thousands of emails, and so on and so forth. So the difference is, like, at the lower local levels, you are going to get a response from that candidate, and you might get that information that you're looking for. And I think a lot of ways, and that's the kind of information that, yes, we can get that information. And I think that's just it's a difficult thing to say, okay, well, I can do some. And I think that's a really good point that you guys were making, is it's like, it doesn't matter how much you can do. If you can do one thing, that's one more thing that's being done properly. And that does make a huge difference. So, you know, that makes your voice count, that makes your vote count. So even if it's only that one thing that you vote on, because you can get the information, you know where to get the information, you know how to get the information, and then you can vote with a clear head, being like, okay, I know what I'm voting for, and I know who I'm voting for. I don't feel like I'm voting for what the media is telling me, or something like that. And I think that's a really good point. And that's something that I know for me, I haven't really kind of thought as much about that. And that's, I think it's very important, is it's like, okay, so even if it's only one person, like, okay, so even if I go to grab my ballot and fill it out for that one person, I just made a difference. Whether it be, you know, whether it does something or not, it doesn't matter. The difference is now I'm in the mindset where I'm making a difference because I feel good about that. I feel good about voting for that person and something like that. I think the overarching problem is it's like, it's hard for people to want to put in that research when, you know, 5 of every 6 candidates they go look up are just mumbo jumbo that, like, what people ask them, publicists ask them, like, hey, what's this? What do you think on this thing? And they give a blanket statement, so they're not held to one end or the other, so that they don't lose vote. And it's kind of difficult, because that's kind of what it's turned into, is people playing the middle ground, because they realize if they play one side, they're stuck over here. If they play another side, they're stuck over here. And whichever side's popular in that area wins. So they're like, okay, well, if I play the middle ground, I have a better chance of kind of like, you know, so you don't really get clear answers on a lot of different things. And again, it depends on the person. So certain candidates will just, no, like, that's what I think. You're gonna, you either like it or you don't. Like, that's the point. And those are the people that are really, like, that I can appreciate. And those are the people that I can look at and be like, yeah, I want to vote for that person, because, like, it's clear. I know what I'm getting into, or I know what I don't want to vote for that person. You know, it's kind of one of those things. So I think that's a very, like, good point, and I appreciate you guys for bringing that up, because it was something, I guess, not really thought about on, like, that low of a level, because a lot of people are like, if you're not voting for everything, you're not voting. And it's like, no, that's not the case. As long as you're voting for something that you believe in, you're voting. As long as you're sharing that opinion of what you think, and you're trying to make a difference, you're doing that duty that you needed to do. And I think a lot of times it's going to take some time for the information that is actually important that people are going to want for that to actually come out in the way that people can actually digest properly and actually understand what they're digesting. Because, like Micah was saying, a lot of the stuff on ballots is just like sugar coated stuff. And then you've got the one important detail that they're trying to tell you. But around it, you've got all this sugar coating to have you glisten and miss the piece that they don't want you to know about. And then you're like, I don't know what I just read. So then you're like, great, I need to break it down into sections. And you break it down into sections, and you're like, still doesn't make sense. And then you break it down into like words, and then you're like, oh, I don't like this. But it took you 4 hours to figure that out. You're like, why did I just waste 4 hours of my life to learn like this is horrible and I don't want it? No. That's the kind of stuff. I think that kind of information is another thing that it's like, it's the system. The system it encourages people to do that right now. And I think that's the hard part is like a lot of those things, like for me, I would say that's not worth my time because a lot of times like I could just leave it blank because I probably wouldn't vote for it anyway if it's that sugar coated. And it's kind of difficult because it's like, it makes me not want to read through it because it's like, they're trying to make me miss something. And it's like, it's deception at its purest form. They're literally surrounding it with things to make me not see it. So I don't realize what's actually going on. And for me, it's like, that's the kind of stuff that I feel like I should not be supporting in any way. Like I don't want to be a part of that. But like you guys were saying, there's other stuff going on that's not doing that. And there are people who aren't doing that. And those are the things I need to be looking for instead of looking through this mess. And I guess the hard part is finding, okay, what's that and what's the other thing? Because right now it's all kind of one thing. And that's, I think, the biggest issue is that it's being looked at as it's one thing and it's not this separation. There's no separation between the whole and then the little pieces, because right now it's voting. Like, should I vote or should I not vote? That's the question. Like, does my vote matter? On what? Does my vote on what matter? And I think that's like, it's breaking it down. Like, yes, it matters in some areas, and in some areas right now it really doesn't. It just depends. So it's very, I guess breaking it down is definitely a better way to look at it. And I haven't really thought about doing that, at least to that degree, to such a large degree where it's individual pieces instead of, you know, even local versus national, something like that. It's breaking it down to what's in the local, like all of it, you know. And I think that's a really good point that you guys made. So
nice.
And share with your friends. Tell your friends. When you learn or you want something, go tell your friends.
Well, and
you got...
we're all
sorry, go ahead, Lee.
I think I'll go quick.
No worries.
When you talk about sharing with others and sharing with your friends, and I think that this is a really important thing to think about with how do we communicate with each other, because one of the things I like with how this has kind of gone full circle in what you're saying, Lee, is being able to go to your friends and say, hey, you know, I learned this cool thing in a discussion with my brothers the other day about, you know, voting and discussion and kind of breaking it down to a smaller level and just taking bits and pieces. And when you're able to share with someone information that's unbiased, it's just, hey, this is a more simple way to do this thing. I think it's really easy for other people to take it in. And I think that's the part of this doing this whole podcast and really, even whether we're talking about something more difficult or more low key, I want people to understand that the only way that information is shared is through civil discussion and communication. In my opinion, you can scare someone into doing something, or you can scream and yell at them until they say they'll do it, and then they'll walk away and not do it. But you never change your mind by trying to hammer it into somebody. You can reshape the mind through manipulation, which I think has happened some. But you're not going to be able to have a good, honest relationship and conversation with someone and change their mind by forcing them to do so. So I think it's really cool to have a long discussion, to be able to visualize and to talk your way through something and see it from a point of, this is just a simpler way to go about doing something that I want to be involved with, but I don't feel good about right now. And So I think when it is important, like you said, John, to go share it with others. But for me, it's all about how am I sharing this information? Am I pushing it and saying you must do this, or am I like, hey man, I learned this really cool thing the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes such a huge difference. I know for me, listening, I'm on Facebook too much and seeing there's certain people that I just mute because I'm like, you have a point to make, and you're making it by cussing at people and telling them they're stupid.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm interested in your point, but I'm not interested in your attitude and how you're trying to communicate. How you're trying to communicate with me is you're telling me I'm dumb and I need to do what you say. I have no interest in that. And so I think it's really important to make sure when we share with others that it doesn't come off that way to them. And that's a tough thing to do because there are some people that are like real easy to communicate and there are some that are tough to communicate with. So I think that's something to think about and I think is really good to do through discussion because I think, you can have that discussion with your friend and they may be like, well, what about this? And then you can have a talk about it. And I think that's how we all learn. I've written down a couple of sources from our conversation that I want to go check out because I think that the Ballotpedia really interested me because that was my biggest struggle with candidates was finding information on them because their websites, again, even though they have information, a candidate's website's never going to tell their full story.
Yeah.
It's going to tell you the story that they want you to hear. We had a father who ran for governor. We know this. So
yeah.
Yep.
And that's how that's what they should be doing. I don't want you to air your dirty laundry. I want you just to tell me about what you want to do, which I think he did. But yeah, I guess I just kind of that communicating with others I think is so important in how we do that to ensure that we keep the communication open with them. Because otherwise we end up defeating ourselves before we get going because I make a decision in the first 5 seconds of whether or not I'm going to listen to someone and what they have to say. And it has nothing to do with what they're communicating, it's how they communicate,
Yeah.
So I think that's a really key thing. And I think that's probably part of why you were able to take the information tonight, Lee, and kind of because I could tell at the beginning of the conversation, I knew where you stand, which is like, I really don't like where the system is at, and I don't want to contribute to this system. But I think through the course of the conversation that allowed you time to think about it, to ponder the ideas, give feedback here and there, and it allowed you to have a thought process and have feedback to make your, to communicate how you feel about things and kind of it's this back and forth where you get to feel it out and see where it's going to go before having to commit to what decision you're going to make, as opposed to just being like, oh, this is what they said, I better do it. Or this is what they said, I disagree, I'm going to move away. And I think that's where we're at, and that's not good for decision making. We shouldn't make our decision in the first 5 minutes. We should have the time to learn and grow and understand, and then decide how to move forward. So I'll stop talking because if I don't, I'll just keep blabbing on.
Yeah, I think I know we need to wrap it on Josiah, and I think we both have early mornings tomorrow. I don't know about you guys, but I know I've got a really early morning, and knowing what Josiah's doing, I'm guessing he probably does too.
Yeah, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If any of you need to hop off quickly, you can. Feel free. I believe my recording is at the 2